Today we're going to be learning Yoma Daf Pei Gimel. Today is the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is sponsored by Vicky Herzog in honor of her father, Izzy Herzog. May today's learning go to the Eloi of his neshama. I miss my father each and every day. We're going to start from the beginning of Pei Gimel Amud Aleph. Quote from the Mishnah. Choleh machilin oto al pi biki'in. So a sick person gets fed by biki'in, by experts. There's two lines in the Mishnah. We should really read the second line as well. That means if we want to know, should a sick person eat, we go to the experts. First of all, what are experts? So there's actually an excellent shiur by Dr. Ayala Lipson that will be on our site. It is up on our site. And it's a shiur about this topic of a chole. And I'll quote throughout some things that Ayala says, but I strongly encourage you to listen to her shiur because it's an excellent shiur, basically talking about self-autonomy in halacha. And she actually has a book that she put out about this topic, and this is one of the central sugyot. And what seems from this sugya is that in the beginning, we see the Mishnah, and the Mishnah seems to say we go by biki'in, experts in the field. We trust the experts. First of all, she points out that experts usually does not mean experts meaning a doctor. Experts is usually used when it means a halachic expert, a legal expert, and someone who knows the law. So that's one point to take into consideration. Who exactly are these biki'im? We're going to notice that once we get to the Gemara, it's already going to be called the rofei, the doctor. This is in Rabbi Yanai's words. But in the Mishnah, it's the biki'im. The second line is an ein sham biki'im, machilin oto al pi atzmo ad shi'omar dai. If there aren't biki'im, and we're going to need to figure out what exactly does this line mean, then we feed him by himself. In other words, he decides how much food he needs, and until he says, I don't need food anymore. So Amar Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai comes along and says, Chole omer tzarich, v'rofei omer eno tzarich. He gives a few different scenarios. The sick person says, I need to eat. And the doctor says, you don't need to eat. So who do we hold by? So the halacha is, according to Rabbi Yanai, who's an emorah from Israel, shomin lechole. We go by the chole. My timer, what's the reason? Lev yodea marat nafsho. The heart knows its own self, and therefore we go by that. To which the Gemara says, Pshita. Isn't that obvious that people know themselves whether they need to eat or not? So the Gemara says, no, ma'u detema rofei kim leitfei. Maybe the doctor knows more, and the doctor says no. So maybe we listen to the doctor. Kamash malan, that we listen to the rofei. That we listen to himself. Second case he brings is Rofei Omer Tzarich, the Chole Omer Eno Tzarich. The Rofei says you need to eat, and the sick person says I don't need to eat. Now, according to the theory that we said is the explanation for Rabbi Yanai that Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho, then what would you say? If you say you don't need to eat, then you don't need to eat. But it says here, Rofei Omer Tzarich, Chole Omer Eno Tzarich. Shomin LaRofei, we go by the doctor and he eats. My timer. So now the Gemara is a little bit stuck. They have to explain, well, what's the logic? Didn't we say we go by what he thinks for himself? Tun v'hu dinakeh. This is you must have gone a little insane. It must be the sickness is making him a little delusional. He doesn't really understand where he's at, and therefore, right, which somewhat contradicts what we just said a minute ago, and therefore we have to explain it that way, otherwise it doesn't make so much sense. Now what Dr. Lipson suggests is that it's very likely that, or she actually says that the lines of the explanation are clearly the Stama de Gemara, meaning it's not Rabbi Yanai himself is speaking, but it's the Gemara later giving an explanation of Rabbi Yanai. But if you look just at what Rabbi Yanai says, that we go by who basically, it's in other words, his opinion is we go by whoever says eat, and that his opinion is really based solely on safek nefashot lahakel. If we have any sort of question about whether someone needs to eat or not, we're going to err on the side of saying eat because we want to make sure nothing happens to you. And therefore, if you think it or the doctor thinks that it doesn't really matter, we go by whoever says it. And this explanation of the Gemara that somebody knows themselves, which then became a little bit complicated with the second line of Rabbi Yanai, isn't really Rabbi Yanai speaking, and it's not necessarily reflective of what he really himself thought. It's very interesting, right? If you break down the Gemara into layers, sometimes it helps to explain things that don't make a lot of sense or that don't fit perfectly. So now the Gemara is going to have a series of questions on Rabbi Yanai from our Mishnah. Now, what Dr. Libson wants to suggest is that we have a bunch of different models here. We have the model of the Mishnah, the model of Rabbi Yanai, and later we're going to see the model of Farber of Ashi, where the Stam and the Gemara that we saw now seems to be based on Farber of Ashi. And the Gemara often likes to take everything and mush it all together and say, these have to work together, so how can they work together? But theoretically, what you see here could be three different models. So we so far saw two. One is our Mishnah, and the second one, right, which is all about Biki'im, the experts know everything. Rabbi Yanai, who seems to say we really just err on the side of being the safe side. And then we're going to see a third opinion. That's going to come later. So now we're going to have some questions, how to work Rabbi Yanai in with the Mishnah. It's not. The Mishnah says, which sounds like, notice it says experts in plural. It doesn't say one expert, it says plural. So we have a few questions. It sounds like al pi b'ki'in in, al pi atzmo lo. It sounds like, first of all, only experts and not the individual. Rabbi Yanai thinks the individual can. Number two, al pi b'ki'in in, al pi b'ki achad lo. Sounds like you need experts plural and not just one. And Rabbi Yanai thinks one expert is enough to say you can eat. So it must be that when it says we feed you al pi b'ki'in, it's when he himself says, I don't need to eat. And then you need the baki to come in, because otherwise you wouldn't eat, because he says, I don't need to eat only if you have a baki. But then that doesn't really resolve the issue, because then b'lispule al pi baki, it still should be only singular. That only answered one question. It didn't answer the question of why it's a plural. So they say, fine, we're going to complicate the case even more. So when you have not only the sick person, but also a doctor on his side, and on the other side, you have a doctor saying you can eat. In that case, it doesn't work. You have two on one side saying you don't need to eat, one doctor on the other side saying you should eat. We don't go by that one doctor. You need two. If you have two saying he needs to eat, and he and the doctor, meaning two on the other side, saying I don't need to eat, or he doesn't need to eat, then we go by the two who say you need to eat because it's equal, and we're always going to err on the side of safek nefashot lahakel. But if it's two against one, then he doesn't eat. So now they say, but that's still a problem, because ma'achilino to al pi b'ki'in pshita safek nefashot hu usafek nefashot lahakel. If it's two against two, that would be totally obvious. We wouldn't need the Mishnah to tell us that, because of course we err on the side of two against two when we're going to err on the side of having an eat. So the Gemara says, fine, let's make it even more complicated. You can see how hard it is to match the Mishnah with Rabbi Yanai. They're going to such extents. There are two other witnesses with him, meaning there's three people on his side that said we don't need to, and two on the other side. And the chiddush of the Mishnah is we're going to agree with the two. How do we explain that? 3 against 2. Well, even though Rav Safra says, when it comes to witnesses, we don't care how many you are. 2 are like 100 and 100 are like 2. Meaning, it doesn't matter if you come as a group of witnesses together and you testify together, your testimony is equal to a solid testimony. It doesn't matter if you're 2, it doesn't matter if you're 100. If we have 5 people saying one thing and 2 people saying something else, we don't say 5 beats out 2. We say one group versus one group, they contradict each other, well, everyone goes thrown out of court. In our case, we would say, so now let's see where it goes. So if you say, that's when it comes to somebody testifying about something. That's not the same here. But when it comes to evaluating something, like evaluating should the person eat or not, or evaluating how much land is worth, or whatever it might be, an evaluation, then we go by more people. So if you have 3 here saying he needs to eat, and you have 2 saying he doesn't need to eat, you would think we follow the 3 because it goes batar de'ot. But comes the mission to teach you, and that's only when it comes to financial issues. But here it's a doubt about someone's life at stake. Then we're not going to follow de'ot. We're going to go by safek nefashot lahakel, and we're going to go by the 2 against the 3. That sounds like a good explanation. But now they have another question, which is, now this has to match, though, the second part of the Mishnah. The second line of the Mishnah here in this section was, Im ein sham biki'im, machilin oto al pi atzmo. If there aren't any biki'im to assess the situation, at least that's what it sounds like, machilin oto al pi atzmo. We go by what the sick person says. Now, what's the case? The sick person obviously says, I think I should eat. Well, if the sick person is saying I should eat in this case, and what's the difference between case one and case two? The difference is, are they biki'in or they're not biki'in? We're assuming only one factor changes and not two, which means, bichlal deresha da amar tzarich. If the latter part he says I need to eat, it must be the first part also he says I need to eat. And the Mishnah is telling you, it's true he says we need to eat, but that's not enough. It's because there's biki'in, we're going to hold by the biki'in. In other words, again, how does this sound like the Mishnah works? If he says I need to eat, but there's biki'in, we go by the experts. If there aren't experts, then we'll rely on him. That seems to go clearly against what Rabbi Yanai said, which is we go by him. It doesn't matter if there's biki'in or not. So they answer the following. According to Rabbi Yanai, there must be words missing in this Mishnah, and this is how it should read. In which case is this? That we go by biki'in. The first case really is where he says, I don't want to. Then we have two other people with him, assuming there's two more doctors. They all say, no, you don't need to eat. Two more doctors say you need to eat. We're going to let him eat based on those two doctors. Aval, amar tzarich ani. But if he says, I need to eat, ein sham b'ki'im trei el achad amar lo tzarich, and there aren't two witnesses. What does it mean, ein sham b'ki'im? There aren't two witnesses testifying against him. I'm the sick person. I say I need to eat. Let's say there's two doctors testifying against me. That won't work. Remember Rabbi Yana, he said, I say I need to eat, and the doctor says you don't need to eat. But if there's two doctors, so what does it mean, ein sham b'ki'im? If there aren't two, but only one, and now this is going to be exactly what Rabbi Yana says. El achad, there's only one to amar lo tzarich who says he can't eat. Machilin oto al pi atzmo. But then, according to this, it'll be very clear that Rabbi Yana will hold that if there's two doctors against him, we're going to hold by the two doctors and he can't eat. And that's what it means in ein sham b'ki'im. If there aren't two people against him, then we're going to allow him to eat. Okay, and that's how we worked out. The Mishnah started with the case if he said, I don't want to eat, right? I don't think I need to eat. And the second case was if he says, I do need to eat. Farber of Ashi now comes with a different explanation. He says, Kol hecha da'amar tzarich ani, afilu ika mea da'amar lo tzarich, l'didei shamina. He disagrees with this last point of Rabbi Yana. He says, even if there's 100 people who say that you can't eat, and you say, I need to eat, we believe you. This is where Ayelet Lipson says, this is where you see self-autonomy. It all goes by you. You're allowed to make that decision. Okay, I'll give you where this is very relevant. Number one, in the medical area, right? We all know that you go to a doctor, and it's a big deal nowadays. People say, don't trust, but when I was growing up, it was always that whatever the doctor says is true. But most people nowadays don't really believe that. I don't know if they did then either, but I remember growing up with that attitude. And nothing against doctors, but doctors see us, they see you in a bubble, right? They see you in the room, they check what they check, and doctors, thank God, know a lot of information, much more than we do. On the other hand, we know our bodies better than anyone, right? And there's a certain amount of people getting involved in what's going on and asking questions and understanding, realizing that even if the doctor says something, maybe it needs to be questioned. Maybe I understand something a little better than they do because I'm the one experiencing it. I'll give you another relevant example. In school system, you have a kid in school and there's issues going on in school. And the teacher says, oh, the child doesn't know this and they don't know that. Or we need to do all sorts of things that could come up. And often they say the parents know the child much better. This is something that's very important, that the parent, right, the teacher sees the child a few hours a day, if they're lucky, right, depending on the situation. They see it from a particular vantage point. They don't see what goes on behind the scenes. They don't see all sorts of things. Parents know the children much better than the schools know the children. Yes, it's true. The schools see things that parents don't see. And not to say that schools aren't the case. But this is a good question, right? I've been in situations where I've had, let's say, a disagreement with the school about how to handle something. And sometimes you feel like everybody's standing against you. And maybe there's significance in numbers, right? If they all think that this is what we should be doing, and I think it should be different, well, who am I to say that I'm right? There's significance in numbers. Comes from Farber Avashi, and he says, no, don't be fooled by that. That's not indicative of anything. You're the one who knows the best. You're the one who knows your own body, your own children, or whatever it might be. And you're the one who knows how the best way to proceed is. This is a very important opinion, right? And it's very interesting what Ayelet Lipson talks about. Dr. Lipson, it's all about the idea of, we always look at halacha as it's brought down from the top. And what she tries to show in all sorts of sugyot is that the rabbis have this concept of self-autonomy. It's a very interesting theory, and you can see it in a lot of different sugyot. I highly recommend her book. And I have it here on the shelf. I think I just remember the name of it. Anyway, I will here. It's called Law and Self-Knowledge in the Talmud. Okay, by Ayelet Hoffman Lipson. Very recommended book. Okay, so now we go on and we have Mar Baravashi. So he says even 100 lo tzarich, right? You say I need, they say you don't need food, you still get to eat on Yom Kippur. L'didei shamina, why? Because shenemar lev yodeh marat nafsho. And here's where she claims they took this pasuk from here and they put it onto Rabbi Yanai, but it wasn't necessarily Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai was all about safek nefashot lahakim. He's all about self-autonomy. Tonight, but now we're going to have a question on him. How do we read the Mishnah according to his reading? Im yesham beki'im achilin oto al pi atzmo. Tama deleka beki'im, ha'ika beki'im lo. Sounds like if there's beki'im, then if there's no beki'im, we're now in that last line. If there aren't experts, then we use it al pi atzmo. But it sounds like if we have beki'im, we go by the beki'im. So hachikama, this is how you should read it, because he thinks we don't go by beki'im at all. We always go by the person. That's only if he says I don't need. Then we follow beki'im. Aval amar tzarichani ein sham beki'im klal. Machilino to piatzmo shenemar lev yodeh marat nafsho. He reads ein sham beki'im as if you say lo tzarich, if you say I need food, then there aren't any beki'im, meaning no one else is an expert compared to you. If you think you need food and you eat food. Okay, no one else is considered an expert. Don't let them intimidate you into thinking so. And therefore, right, that's because lev yodeh marat nafsho. Very interesting. So we're going to move on now to the next mission. Misha chazo bumus, someone who gets sick with a disease that's basically you're ravenous and you get sick from being ravenous. Which could very well happen on Yom Kippur. Machilinoto afilu dvarim tmeim. You can even feed him non-kosher food until his eyes start being able to see again. It seems to cause blindness. You get bitten by a wild dog. You don't feed him from the lobe of the dog's liver. Okay, apparently people believe that was something that could heal you. And the Tanakhama thinks that this isn't really something that can heal you. Maybe it's like an old wives' tale, and therefore, since it's not kosher, we don't let you eat it. Rabbanit ben Charash matir, he believed that this is the way you're going to be cured from the dog bite, and therefore allowed people to eat non-kosher. If you have an infection in your throat, which seems to be something that we consider dangerous, in halacha there's always a chole that has sakana and a chole without sakana, meaning one whose life is in danger and one whose life is not in danger. And there's all sorts of distinctions in halacha, both in Hilchot Shabbat, in Hilchot Yom Kippurim, how you can eat, whether you need to eat b'shiurim or not shiurim. Reb Chaim Brisk was known to talk about he makes this distinction. The Shulchan Aruch says even a sick person is supposed to eat b'shiurim, meaning eat less than a shiur every 9 minutes. But he said that when the Shulchan Aruch says that, it was only talking about a chole that's not endangered. But cholet sheish bas sakana eats normally on Yom Kippur. There's no such thing as shiurim. If you notice, the Gemara here doesn't talk about shiurim, but the Shulchan Aruch paskins in this seif where he talks about all these halachot. The Rofei says this, the cholet says this. What do? He brings up that you eat b'shiurim. But Reb Chaim didn't understand that was across the board. He says that's only if it's not a dangerous situation. If your life is in danger, you eat regular. You don't, right? And people like to say about himself, I'm machmir about, I'm not. Right? People would say, "Oh, you're very lenient about Yom Kippur." You would say, "I'm machmir about safek, about nefasha, right? About people's lives." Took that very seriously. So he says, you can put drugs in his mouth on Shabbat. It seems to mean you can even grind the drugs. Okay, grinding it is the problem. To grind up the spices or the herbs that go into the drug, that's really forbidden on Shabbat. Usually we say the issue of taking medicines on Shabbat because you might come to grind it. Here it seems the Mepharshim understand he means you can even do everything you need because this is a cholesh sheyesh bo sakana, right? He says it because his life is a danger. The chol safek nefashot dochet Shabbat, and any safek nefashot overrides Shabbat. Misha nafla alav mapol. Okay, fascinating that we're getting to this. We're in a week where we had this terrible tragedy in Miami last week, where a building collapsed, and here you have it in the Mishnah. If a building collapses on you, there's a mapolet. Safek husham, safek enosham. We don't know if there's anybody there or not. Safek chai, safek met. We don't know if they're alive or dead. Safek nochri, safek Israel. We don't know if they're Jewish or not Jewish. Now, we're talking about on Shabbat or Yom Kippur. Are you allowed to override Shabbat? Generally, right. Also for a non-Jew. We allow you, due to this concern that maybe the person's alive, maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're right, maybe they're there, maybe they're not there. Even though there's all these doubts, we allow you to do this because maybe you'll save somebody's life. I'm not going to get into this whole idea about the Gentile. It's another whole topic. There's all these sugyot that are difficult to swallow about what you wouldn't, if you knew for sure it was a Gentile and you're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. So this whole question asked there. I'm not going to get into that issue. Let's just take it for now. Right? Sometimes we just have to swallow things and move on because we don't have time to deal with everything, but we will deal with it in other sugyot. If you find him chai, mifakchim. So now, let's say you're digging, take through the rubble, you find someone alive, you keep digging and you're allowed to continue. But imet yinichuhu. But if you find the person underneath and as you've gotten through, you know there's nobody else, let's say, and you've gotten to the one person that's there and you find that they're dead, so you stop mid-action and you wait till after Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan. So the Gemara starts off with a bright. How would you know that he could see again? Now we're assuming maybe it's dark, maybe it's nighttime and there's no light and there's no way to know if he can actually see because nobody can see in the dark. So there's another way to check. And this sounds very much like Corona. When you know to distinguish between good and bad food. Okay, now this has to do, Amar Abayi explains, uvetama. This goes by taste. I just heard last week someone who had Corona from one of the first few cases of Corona, and she said she still can't taste food. And her kids say to her, she has no taste or smell. And her kids say to her when she goes to eat something, though, that's spoiled, don't eat that. And she has no idea because she can't taste anything. That's exactly what they're discussing here. Tanu Rabbanan, another bright. Now we said in the Mishnah that you can feed them even non-kosher items. So now they're going to say, well, there's a hierarchy. We go from the least severe to the highest. Okay, so for example, tevel univela, if you have untithed produce and you have a dead animal, machilino tonivela, because untithed produce, if you eat it, it's mitabi de shamayim, death by the hands of God. If you eat a dead animal, it's only a low tase, you get lashes. That's less severe. Tevelu shvi'it, if you have shmita produce, this is after the time of bi'ur. There's a halacha, you can eat your own shmita produce that grows anyway, but you're not allowed, once the animals don't have it anymore in the fields, you can't eat it anymore because it says it's for you and your animals. So as soon as your animals can't have any, you have to take everything out of your house and say, except for grabs, anyone who wants it can take it. So you're not really allowed to eat it. So, but that's better than eating tevel. Why is that? Because even though it's serious, it's not as serious because theoretically you can, the question is why exactly, but it seems like it's the kind of thing that you can say it's hefker and then you can actually have it after that. As long as you let everybody else have it, it seems like you can also have it yourself. So it's less severe. Tevel u'truma tanaihi. What if you have tevel or you have truma? Now these are kind of both two sides of the same coin. Why? If you have tevel, it means you haven't taken the truma and the maaser from it. So theoretically, you could take the truma and maaser from it, and then you end up with fixed produce and some truma. But once you do that, let's say you need to eat all the food. So then you need to eat truma. Now, what's worse? Is it worse to eat it when it's tevel, untithed entirely? Or is it better to do the tithes, separate them out, and then you eat them all, even though you're really not allowed to eat truma? So that's a question. And they say it's a Tanaitic debate. Tanai. Titanya, as it says in the following bright. Machilino to tevel ve'em machilino to truma. So the first opinion says, better to eat the untied produce rather than eat truma. Remember, someone who's a non-kohen can't eat truma. Now, both of these are death in the hands of God. Ben Tema Omer, truma v'lo tevel. He says, no, better to eat a truma. Separate the truma and maslo, call it truma, and then eat it when it's truma. Better that than tevel. Amar Rabba, so Rabba explains, he explains this whole thing. He says, if you really can separate it and eat only the chulin part, the part that is yours, then everybody agrees you do that. That's clear. The question is, what if you can't do that? Meaning you need all of the whole pile you need to eat. It's not going to be enough if you just eat some of it. Meaning you need to eat the truma part. So mar savar tevel chamor, mar savar truma chamura. Mar savar tevel chamor, one holds tevel, one holds truma. The one who holds tevel says, aval truma chazi lekohen. Since truma can be eaten by someone, even though not by you, but it can be eaten by a kohen, it's better. Tevel can't be eaten by anybody. Umar savar truma chamura aval tevel efshar letikune. Well, it's true that the kohen can eat truma, but you can never eat truma because you're not a kohen. So therefore, the tevel, at least, you can't eat it now, but once you take the tithe, you tithe the produce, you can eat it. So therefore, better that. So now they say, this whole thing that Rabba said, when it's efshar b'chulin, everyone agrees that you take the truma and the maslo out and then eat the chulin. They say, pshita, obvious that you would do that. Why are you even mentioning this? So they say, lo tzricha b'shabbat. He meant if it happens on Shabbat. Now on Shabbat, you're not allowed to tithe produce. Okay, there's different reasons given. One reason our Mishnah, the Gemara is going to say in a minute, which is it's something that's called muktzah, because you can't do it on Shabbat. Well, it's a little bit circular. But because of that, it's not prepared from before Shabbat. Things that aren't prepared from before Shabbat, you can't use on Shabbat. But the main reason usually given, this is a strange reason given, that they call it muktzah really. But normally we say it's because it's tikkun, you're fixing something. And fixing something is like makebe patish, putting the final blow on something. And some people will say it's a little bit like a business interaction almost, because you're separating this out, you're giving that to the kohen, that to the Levi. It looks like you're doing business. So for all those reasons, you normally shouldn't do it. But therefore, he tells you, no, but that's better to do that, right, than this. So the Gemara says, b'Shabbat nami pshita. So it's obvious, though, that would be more significant, right, that you would do that. Because that obviously we're going to allow you better do that than to eat tevel. We'll let you fix it on Shabbat because tiltul be Rabbanit. Carrying, which really they mean muktzah here, is only Rabbanit. So of course, no matter how you look at truma and maschot and the fact that you can't do it on Shabbat, is everyone agrees no matter what you look at it, it's only rabbinic in nature. So of course we're going to say do that, better to do that, and then eat the chulin than eat tevel. That's not a question. So they say well, it must be Rabbanit. Okay, that it must be a case where also the truma is Rabbanit, the tevel is Rabbanit. Then everything's on a rabbinic level, and then we don't know which one should go, and that's why he's telling you better to do the truma and maslo. What's in atzit she'eino nakuv? It's a plant. It's in a planter. It doesn't have any holes, so it's not attached to the ground. So only by rabbinic law do you have to take truma and maslo, and therefore it's going to be less severe. And therefore, you might have thought maybe we don't take truma and maslo on Shabbat because that's also rabbinic in nature. Comes to teach you that we do take truma and maslo. If you can actually eat a chulin, then for sure you take truma and maslo, eat the chulin, give the truma to the kohen, perfect. But the machloket is right. So again, mar savar tevel chamor, mar savar truma chamura. But if you can't do that, if that's not going to help you, then are you better off taking truma and maslo and eating them as truma, or not doing anything and eating it as tevel? Lema Tanaihi. Let's suggest that what Rabba said here, that's the machloket, is a machloket Tanaim we see somewhere else. Titania. Misha nishacho nachash. If you get bitten by a snake, korin lerofe mimakom lemakom. You can call a doctor to come from far away. Umikarin lo et hatarnigolet. You can tear a rooster, okay, or a hen. Why would you do this? Some people say to eat because you need food. Some to make you better. Some people say, right, it's the antidote, or maybe you put it on the snake bite. That was something maybe they did. You can, this is, by the way, we're talking on Shabbat. You can cut leeks, you can take them, harvest leeks. And you can feed him the leeks without taking the masra. That sounds like the opinion that says better eat it tevel. Divrei Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, lo yuchal ad she'yaser. He says, no, better to eat the truma, right? Take the masro first. So name of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon he below Rebbe. It sounds like Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is holding what Rabbi said, right? And not Rebbe. So now they say, no, afilu tema Rebbe, even if you say, because remember, what did Rabbi say? Rabbi said, make sure to take the maser, right? If you can take the maser, take the maser. Okay, then there was this debate whether if you can't, but if you can, better to take the maser. Don't eat it without maser. And now they say, no, afilu tema Rebbe. We're going to distinguish between these cases. There with the leeks, maser of vegetables is different. According to the Torah, you're supposed to take maser on dagan, tirosh, yitzhal, grains, grapes, and olives, not on anything else. So yirakot, vegetables in general, is all d'Rabbanan. And that's why we're going to say that you don't need to take the maser here, according to Rebbe, because it's only maser d'Rabbanan. Now, our case is also maser d'Rabbanan, but aval b'maser dagan. But our case is, let's say, grains, things that are obligated truma masrot on a d'oraita level. The tevel d'oraitahu, afilu Rebbe modeh. Now, even though we dropped it to a d'Rabbanan, but because we said it's in an atzitz she'eno nakuv, it's in a potted plant, right? It's in a planter there that doesn't have holes. But since it's a grain, which if it were in the ground, it would be on a d'oraita level, on a Torah level. If we allow you to do it in this case where it's in the planter, you might come to do it also in another case. Therefore, we're going to be stringent there, since the issue comes out of a d'oraita issue, even though it's not real. Whereas when it comes to the leeks, there's no truma d'oraita ever there. And that's why Rebbe says there, you don't need to do the maser. Okay, you don't need to take the truma maser. You don't need to tithe the produce. So therefore, you can't say that this is the same debate that Rabba was talking about. Tanu Rabbanit, misha achazo bulmus. Now they're going to give you different advice about what to do when you have bulmus. Okay, this is more the nutritional, medicinal words of the rabbi. So what do you do? Machilino to dvash b'chomine mitika. Right, we know this. If you get very faint, people usually give you sugar, right? Some juice to drink. Sugar foods. So that's what they say here. Because they light up the eyes. People, right, they bring back your vision. Even though we don't have proof for this, we have some reference to it in the Nevi'im. In Sefer Shmuel, it's with Yonatan, the son of Shaul. It says, oh, look, they were out to war. He hadn't eaten. Look, my eyes lit up because I had some honey. So now they say, what do you mean this wasn't a proof? This was like a perfect proof. They say, the hatam love bulmus. What? Nobody said he was sick with bulmus there. Just, he was hungry. So the dvash gave him more energy, but it's not necessarily he had bulmus. So it's not a perfect proof. Amar Abai, lo shanu ela achar achila, aval kodem achila migragari. He points out, don't have honey at the beginning. First eat something else and then have honey, because if you eat honey at the beginning, it's just going to make you more hungry. How do we know this? Also from a verse. They found an Egyptian in the field. They brought him to David. They gave him bread and he ate. They gave him water. They started giving him fruits, sweet fruits. And he ate and his spirit came back to him. What do you notice? Right? And then they tell you before, let's just finish the verse. He didn't eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. It's obviously ravenous. And what did they do? First, they gave him bread and water. Only after that did they give him the sweet fruits. So that's your proof for Abaye that you should wait till you have some other food in your body first. You dip the tail of the animal into honey. Even very fine flour dipped in honey. Even, normally people didn't like the flour that was made from the barley flour, but even that with honey is good. One time I was sick with bulmus. I went to the east side of the fig tree. I fulfilled the verse that wisdom will keep a person alive. How so? If you want the real good figs, go to the east side because that's where the sun rises in the morning. gets the most sun, and because of that, it makes it makes it sweeter. The sun sweetens it. Okay, which means that from the land is blessed from the east side. Okay, so therefore he said, I was smart enough to go there, and that helped me with my bulmus. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. We're going to hear some more stories about bulmus. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi were walking. They were walking on the path. He gets sick with bulmus. He grabs from one of the shepherds, grabs his food, and eats his bread. Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says to him, what did you do? You just stole from that shepherd. How could you have done that? When they get to the city, Rabbi Yossi now gets sick with bulmus. People from the city came out. Everybody gave him something. Notice he doesn't steal. He does it nicer. He comes into the city sick. Everybody comes out bringing him something. Well, this is like when someone has a baby and people start bringing them tons of food, right? You don't even know what to do with it. So this looks like a good thing because he didn't steal from anyone. Amarle Rabbi Yehuda was a little bit annoyed that he insulted him before, that he stole from the shepherd. Rabbi Yehuda says to him, all I did was steal from one shepherd. You stole from the entire city. Right? No, he didn't really steal, but by him walking into the city sick and basically causing everybody to bring him food, it's almost as if he stole from them. He's obviously making a bit of a joke here, but he's trying to say, you have to keep that perspective in mind as well. Obviously, they did it out of their own free choice, but maybe you'd say they didn't really have free choice since the rabbi showed up with bulmus and they felt responsible. And it's an interesting way to think about when people bring you food, you almost theoretically somewhat stealing from people. I hope you don't feel that way because I think it's very important sometimes to accept food from other people. Vitu, additionally, another story. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi have a azli ba'orcha. Okay, totally different story. They were walking on a path. They were on the way somewhere. Rabbi Meir have a daik b'shma. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi love a daik b'shma. Rabbi Meir was very careful when he met someone. He would darshan their name. If their name sounded like good, then they would know he was a good person. If his name was a bad name, he'd know no good name. But Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda didn't do that. Kimatu lahu duchta. They got to a certain place, Ba'ush Pisa. They went to stay in an inn. Yavilahu. So he gives them a place to stay. Amr lo mashima. So they said to him, what's your name? Amar lahu Kidul. He says, my name is Kidul. Amal, Rabbi Meir says to himself, Shmamina Adam Chashahu. This guy must be a really bad guy. Shenemal Kidor Tapuchotem. Kidor is a combination of two words. Because they're a generation of tapuchot, they're a terrible generation of people. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, ishlu lekisayu. Since they didn't darshan names, they gave him his money. It was Shabbat. They wanted someone to watch their wallet. They gave it to him. Rabbi Meir, lo ashlim lekisei. Rabbi Meir says, I'm not giving him my money. I don't trust him. So what do you do with his money over Shabbat? He goes to the grave of the innkeeper's father, and he puts it there. The innkeeper that night has a dream. He sees his father. He says, go take this wallet that's on my head. That's what he tells him in the dream. In the morning, he says to them, he tells them about his dream. Amrele, and it seems like the nusach should be Amrele, Rabbi Meir, and some people have this version. Rabbi Meir says to him, he realizes he's going to go take my money. He says, Friday night dreams don't have any significance because Friday night you're on vacation, you're relaxed, right? All sorts of weird ideas come into your head. They don't really mean anything. So he waits all day by his money, and Shabbos ends. He brings his money back. Nothing happens because he convinced the innkeeper not to pay any attention to his dream. The next day, the other rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, say to him, Havlan Kisan, give us back our money. Amar lehu, what are you talking about? You never gave me any money. Amar lehu, Rabbi Meir, Amaylo dakitu b'shma. Rabbi Meir says to them, why didn't you darshan his name? Had you just paid attention to his name, you would have realized he was a no good nick. Hamrule, of course, what do they respond to him? Amaylo amar lamar. Why didn't you tell us, right? If you knew he was a bad guy, you should have told us. To which Rabbi Meir responds very wisely, Amar lehu, Amor, what I was going to say, Da amre ana chashasha, I would tell you I'm concerned for something. Achzuke mi amre. In other words, I was concerned but I don't know for sure he was a bad guy. I just said I should best avoid this person. I'm not going to give him my money. I'm not going to trust him, but I wasn't going to start bad-mouthing him to other people. I don't know if my concerns were right or not. Happens they were right, but who knew then whether I was going to be right or not, right? It's a very dangerous position to be in. Should you tell people? Should you not? You're going to, give this guy a bad rap when maybe he doesn't deserve it. So mashchu va'ailu lechanuta, they brought him into the store. Chazu talfachai asfame. Okay, so they it seems like they wanted to kind of get, I'm trying to remember what they wanted him to do by going into the store, but they push him, they kind of get him into the store. 1 second, I just want to look for a minute. Right, it says they wanted to make him drink wine maybe. So they thought that maybe if they got him drunk, he would tell them where he put the money. So they bring him into the store and they see that he has lentils on his mustache. So they realize we have a plan. So they go to the wife and they said, listen, your husband said he should give you the money that he gave you right before Shabbat. And how do I know that your husband told me this? Because he told me to tell you that you fed him lentils for lunch. And that way, it was clear that it came from him, even though it was only because he had lentils on his mouth that they knew that. But she didn't know that. So she gives them the money and they go. So you think the story's over and they got their money back. All is great. But what happened? He went back and murdered his wife for this. Wow. Quite serious, quite harsh. Hainu ditnan, and this is what they say in the Mishnah. Mayim achronim he'echilu basar chazil. Mayim achronim hargot hanefesh. This is the Mishnah that was trying to say how important it is to do wash before eating and wash after eating. So our story is the Mayim achronim story. Mayim achronim, the fact that he didn't wash after he ate caused someone to die. So if you don't do Mayim achronim, look what could happen. Mayim rishonim caused somebody to eat pig. Why? Because there was a guy who was an innkeeper and he would give the kosher meat to the Jews and the pig to the non-Jews. And somebody came in and didn't wash his hands before eating and he assumed he wasn't Jewish. So here he's saying, if you wash before you eat, then everyone will know you're Jewish and then they won't feed you pork by accident. Okay, interesting story. Again, a lot to be thought about that story, especially the harsh ending, right? You think about abuse and domestic abuse, which is a very big issue. This is quite the story for that. Okay, next, what happens after that story? After that, they were much more careful about names and darshani names. Let's see the next story. It's not, we're not going to actually hear such a story, but they got to someone's house whose name was Bala. Lo ailu legabe. They wouldn't go into his house. Amrish mamina rashahu. They said he must be a bad person. Dichtiv va'omar lebala neufim. Okay, this is someone, they say, someone who is old from adultery. They spent their life being an adulterer and it made them old. Almost like the picture of Dorian Gray, right? As you do bad things, you get older looking, right? He didn't, that was the whole thing. But, old from adultery. Okay, last part for today. Misha neshachok kelev shoteh. You get beaten by a wild dog. What do? Here's a bright about wild dogs. Okay, the Gemara is not very fond of dogs in general. Tana Rabbanit, but this is a crazy dog. Chamisha dvarim ne'emru b'kelev shoteh. 5 signs of a crazy dog. Piv patuach, his mouth is open. Riro notef, his saliva is spitting out of his mouth. Oznav sruchot, his ears are floppies. Navo munach al yirechotav, his tail is lying on his legs. Umahalech b'tzidei drachim, you see him walking on the sides of the road. V'yeshomrim af noveach ve'en kolo nishma. Some people say he barks and you can't hear his barking at all. Mimai have, what makes someone a mad, crazy dog? Rav amar nachshim kashfaniyot mesachakot bo. It's witchcraft that's doing it. Ushmuel amar ruach ra'a shorei alav. It's an evil spirit. My benayu, what's the difference whether you say it's witches or evil spirit? Ika benayu lemiktale b'davar hanizrak. The question is, when you try to kill it, do you kill it with something that you throw at it? If there's an evil spirit, then you should throw something and don't go close to it. If it was just witchcraft, it's not so dangerous to get near it. It's bewitched, but you won't get bewitched by going near it. So that would be the nafkamina, why you would want to know whether it's that or the other. With that, on such interesting thoughts, we will finish our daf today and have a Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov to everyone. We'll pick up on Sunday.